You're watching Fugitive Red-Eye, and welcome to another Red-Eye Responds. Today I'm going to be looking back at some of my old content once again. And what I will be looking at today is my old unpopular opinions. Back in Gen 2 of the channel, back in 2016, I did 2 videos in Random Thoughts, being things everybody hates but I like, and things everybody likes but I hate. So we're going to take a look and see if I still agree with my younger self, and comment on if I disagree, or if the scale has changed, or anything like that. Let's dive in. But today we're going to be talking about things that everyone else seems to fucking hate, but it really isn't bad, and I can't see why people hate them so much. First thing I'd like to talk about is a video game. And that video game is Duke Nukem Forever. Now, a lot of people absolutely hated that game, because, it's not as good as Duke Nukem 3D, I'll give it that. Alright, so, Duke Nukem Forever. You guys know I still fucking love this game. I'm consistent as hell on this one. I absolutely agree with my younger self. Duke Nukem Forever is fucking great. Even though Duke Nukem 3D is the better game, but Forever is a great follow-up, and people didn't like it because it was the popular bandwagon, the long wait time that it took to come out, the long loading screens, and people being pussies. But we'll get into that a little more as I elaborate. But a lot of people say, oh, it's, you know, the humor is dated, and they call the game sexist, and they say that it's really bad, and that it has all these issues, and, you know, frankly, some of their points are very valid. The only real criticisms I think genuinely are valid. The game's kind of janky, kind of buggy. It's got long load times and bad graphics, especially for how long it took to come out and how late it came out. It is more linear than 3D, but again, it's not 3D. It doesn't have to be 3D. If you want to play 3D, play 3D. Linear does not inherently equal bad. That said, most of the criticisms levied against it are unfair and invalid, but there are still valid criticisms, so I do agree, there is valid criticism. People calling it sexist, probably right on the money, because Duke Nukem has always been like that, and that's why it's fucking great. Like, for instance, the loading screens, I do admit, are very, very, very long. And, like I said, it's nowhere near as good as Duke Nukem 3D. The game is far too linear for a Duke Nukem game. It's very, very linear, and there's hardly anywhere you can go that isn't, you know, predetermined. And I don't think that inherently means it's bad. I mean, is 3D really so non-linear? You still gotta get to the end of the level. Like, people have an obsession with the term linear when it comes to video games. There's still a linear thing if you're going from one place to another place to get to the end of the level. Duke Nukem 3D was still linear in a way, like you had to explore and get the keys, and there's secrets, and there are secret exits to maps and stuff. There's a secret in the fork stop in Duke Nukem Forever, so it's not like it's devoid of secrets. There's just a lot less of them. But again, linear doesn't inherently equal bad. Halo is linear as fuck, but it's great. So I think that linear as a criticism is really unfair, and I think that I was too agreeable when it came to that as a criticism back then. It's far too modernized, for sure, in the gameplay, whereas while it's true it had a lot of conventional stuff from shooters at the time, that's not inherently bad. It's a post-Halo game, a post-Call of Duty game. So there's obviously going to be some conventions that have changed, whether we like it or not. And in this case, I don't really think it's bad. Not to mention, the game still had some pretty unique stuff to it, like the way you increase your health bar. A lot of the shooters at the time didn't really have anything like that, you know, picking up the different ego awards. Not to mention the unlockables you get in My Digs and multiplayer. So there are things that make it unique. Plus, its Capture the Flag game is Capture the Babe, which is pretty fucking great. I don't agree with the whole dated humor thing. I think that, you know, having, you know, it's a game based on a 90s series. I think having some of that 90s humor intact makes it true to its source. That's another thing that people seem to have an obsession with, calling things dated. Just because there's movie and game references that aren't, like, of the time, right? Like, it makes references. Like, first off, Halo was still contemporary. Halo 3, Reach, and ODST were still super relevant at the time. Reach had just come out not that long before. So, it's not really genuine to act like it's dated because it references Halo, or because it references Dead Space. These things were still relevant. Even if a couple of them came out a few years before, they were still played, they were still talked about, and just because it references something older doesn't somehow make it dated. They probably also think it's dated because of the way that women are portrayed in the game, but that's just because it's fucking based. Now again, the gameplay isn't true at all to the source material, so again, I can see the argument there on why it's bad. I think that statement younger me made is a little bit nonsensical. Saying the gameplay isn't true to the source material is a really weird thing to say, because Duke Nukem has had so many different kinds of games. Started out as a side-scroller, had a first-person shooter, had 2 third-person shooter platformers, had another side-scroller. It's not like it's strictly been one genre of gameplay. Not to mention, different does not equal bad. So, again, I was too agreeable back then. I've rectified that in later years. And the graphics are nothing to write home about. They're absolute crap. They look like an original Xbox graphics when they were, you know, Xbox 360 and PS3. They look like they could be on a PS2 or original Xbox. Graphics aren't everything, and I think that the game is still very enjoyable. It's very funny, I think. You know, it's still immature humor, but that's what Duke Nukem's always been. And the characters are one-dimensional, but again, staying true to its roots in that aspect. Well, I can see why everyone got pissed off and disappointed, because the game itself was in development hell for 15 years before finally getting released. Not to mention the fact that the game had a lot of earlier versions that were much, much better. Like the 2000 version of the game looked like it would have been completely different. So, funny story, they've restored some of the 2000 version. I played a little bit of it. I prefer the final product. The final version of the game, I think, is better. I still like the older build. I feel like the final product is more fun for me. But I think that the game is very underrated, and if you're looking for a good, funny shooter that, if you don't take it too seriously, the game can be very enjoyable, I think. It has very immature humor, and, well, it's, you know, not something that SJWs would like, because it is very, very anti-PC, and all the women are incredibly sexist stereotypes. As they should be. It's still a very enjoyable game, and I think that it's underrated. Obviously, I agree with that, considering I put it as my #1 underrated game of all time in that video. Another video game that I really liked that a lot of people hated was Brink. While the game itself, I think that the hype really is what killed it. It basically brags that it's like the most customizable game ever, and your character can have all these different possibilities. Although all the character faces look like total ass, I will give it that. And the gameplay is incredibly repetitive. I think that the game is still very good, and although there are things that I don't like about it, I think that it gets very, very much more hate than it deserves. Well, I think Brink is underrated still. I think I was overselling it a bit then. It's been years since I'd played it, mind you, but honestly, I think it is fine, but there are a lot of things, there's better games out there. The thing is, Brink did a lot of what Titanfall did before Titanfall did it, so a lot of the stuff that people see is revolutionary, like, you know, wall climbing and shit like that. Brink did that way before, and there's other games that did it before too, but, and to be clear, I personally don't like Titanfall. I'm not really an online-only kind of guy. I don't really like multiplayer games as much as single-player. And Brink is also clearly designed for multiplayer, so keep that in mind too. It is playable single-player, but it's definitely built with multiplayer in mind. Brink was okay. I honestly think that I was overselling it a bit back then, but it's still okay. It has an amazing soundtrack. That is true. Brink has a kick-ass soundtrack. The story is really good. The fact that you get to play both sides, I think, is really good. Not to mention there's several what-if levels that aren't part of the main storyline for either side, but they're what-if scenarios that have alternate endings. I mean, the story definitely has a lot of elements that I like, but I think a lot of what I liked about it has been done better in other media. In Brink, you play as either the Resistance or the Security on this megacity known as the Ark. It's very fun. I don't know why people hate it so much. Yes, it is incredibly repetitive, and frankly, I would get sick of it if I played it for too long, but it's still a really good game to play, you know, for a little bit at a time every once in a while. It's incredibly difficult, though, so, you know, I haven't beat it. It's very tough, and plus my copy's actually broken. There's a crack in the disc. But Brink is very underrated, and I definitely recommend giving it a play if you can find it. It's like $1 at the store, so, you know, I would recommend it. Moving swiftly on, I thought we'd talk about some TV episodes that for some reason everyone seems to hate. For whatever reason, a lot of people hate the darker SpongeBob episodes, like One Course Meal, or, Are You Happy Now? But those are fucking classic episodes. Why do people... Well, I mean, they're not classic as in old, but they're amazing. I mean, why do people hate them so much? I like it when SpongeBob gets a little bit darker. It's funny. It's, you know, people praise the shit out of Invader Zim for being dark, but when a show like SpongeBob does it, they somehow get upset, which I don't get, because both are great. I mean, I don't know. Maybe that's just me. I like darker episodes. So obviously I still agree with that. I literally did a video on it just a few days ago as part of my Random Thoughts series about how mean-spirited humor gets too much hate.
And speaking of which, I think a whole series that a lot of people completely misjudge is the Ren and Stimpy Adult Party cartoon. Now, there's actually one episode that I myself absolutely hate, and that's the one where they're living in that spittoon. It's fucking gross.
That episode being Onward and Upward. I have always fucking hated that episode. It's literally just gross-out humor.
But, whatever reason, people don't like Ren Seeks Help, which is my favorite episode of not only the Adult Party cartoon, but also of Ren and Stimpy altogether. Yes, it's a lot darker and more fucked up, but that's what makes it great. It was actually originally written in 1991 during the show's original run, but it was never aired, it never was made back then because of Nickelodeon standards and practices. What I don't get is, why do people hate it so fucking much? It's a really great episode, and in fact, it emphasizes some of the darker, better bits of the Ren and Stimpy Adult Party cartoon. And the thing I don't get is people liked Sven Hoek, which is a really fucking dark episode of the original Ren and Stimpy, but yet they didn't like Ren Seeks Help, because it was quote-unquote too mean-spirited.
Okay, I've let younger me ramble on enough. Obviously, I agree with pretty much everything younger me said. I still like the Adult Party cartoon. It is more of a mixed bag than the original in general. There's Onward and Upward, which I wholesale hate. Stimpy's Pregnant, which is really gross too, but it has its moments. Altruist, which is good, but I actually really like Altruist a lot more than I used to, because I rewatched it today, actually. You know, it still has its weird, gross-out moments. They all do, but that's also true with the original Ren and Stimpy. Also, Altruist is like 40 minutes long. It's really fucking long, but I actually didn't feel like it dragged. I thought it was fine. I used to say, yeah, it's really long. It is really long, but it didn't bother me. But I still quite like the Adult Party cartoon. It's definitely got its flaws. Sometimes it's just kind of gross, and sometimes the jokes fall a little bit flat. It's hit or miss at times, but I still overall very much enjoy it. You know, I like Ren and Stimpy, and I like the Adult Party cartoon, even though there are issues with both.
Another thing I really loved, another TV series that a lot of people hated, was Dragon Ball GT. I thought it was an adequate sequel to Dragon Ball Z and a great follow-up. I think that it gets too much hate. In fact, I don't consider it a separate series. I consider Dragon Ball, Dragon Ball Z, and Dragon Ball GT to be all one series.
I've even taken it a step further nowadays and said I prefer GT over Z, and that is true. GT is fucking great, and people who don't like it either bandwagoning, are stupid because they can only handle big fight scenes, or they haven't actually fucking watched it.
That it gets very much more hate than it deserves, and part of me thinks, now this is just my opinion, this might not actually be the case, but part of me thinks this is part of a hive mind. People hear about how bad it is and they just jump on the bandwagon.
That absolutely is the case. I've fucking seen it, and I can't remember if I mentioned that in this video, but I guess we'll see in a minute. It absolutely is true, though.
Again, this very much could be not the case, and if it isn't, I'm sorry. If you actually genuinely dislike it, you know, that's fine. You know, it's your opinion, just like this video is just mine.
Nah, fuck that. If you disagree, fuck you. I was too agreeable. Fuck that pussy shit. Fuck you.
I also really liked the second season to Black Butler, even though a lot of people didn't like that. Same with, Psycho Pass or Tokyo Ghoul. You know, second seasons of animes, a lot of the times nowadays I've noticed they've been basing the first season off a manga and then the second season they'll make up on their own. And a lot of people don't like that, but sometimes I think it turns out really well.
While I do still like a lot of those second seasons, and I do think that second season syndrome, as I've coined it, is definitely real, where they'll do the first season based on the manga, second season's unrelated and hated. I still like a lot of those second seasons, but I am fully willing to admit that there are flaws with a lot of them, and there are things that aren't good with them, even though I still quite like them. Black Butler Season 2 has a lot of issues. I definitely think Book of Circus, Book of Murder, and Book of Atlantic are better, but I still really like Season 2. I really like the scene where Eloise is like, Clyde, you're all I have, and then gets fucking stabbed. I love that scene. That scene's really fucking sad. Eloise is a pretty tragic character, even though he's a fucking prick.
For instance, the sequel to Donnie Darko, which is S. Darko. Anyway, as I was saying, S. Darko, although it's no Donnie Darko, I think it gets way more hate than it deserves. I'd say it's an okay sequel. I mean, time resets a lot more and the plot's a lot more muddled, but I really do think that it's a fairly decent movie, and if you haven't seen it because how bad you've heard it is, I recommend you watch it and decide for yourself what you think about it.
It's actually been fucking years since I've seen S. Darko, so I honestly can't comment on whether or not I still like it. from my memory of it, the feeling I had toward it at the time is kind of similar to the feeling I have currently to Battle Royale 2, where it's a fucking mess, but I enjoy it for what it is. Because Battle Royale 1 is fucking great. Battle Royale 2, it's a mess, but it's fun. It's a fun mess. There's elements I like. That's how I felt about S. Darko at the time, but I haven't seen it in years, so I can't speak to my current thoughts.
Now, this one's technically cheating because I don't particularly like the movie. I know it's a terrible movie, but at the same time, I enjoy it, even though it's fucking horrible. And also, I don't think everyone hates it, so again, this is still kind of cheating on the title. But anyway, as I was saying, the one that I'm talking about now is the Star Wars Holiday Special, which a lot of people say is too bad to even be so bad it's good, but I disagree. I actually do enjoy watching it. I've seen it twice. Actually, 2.5 times, technically, because I watched it about halfway through with Super Dantastic, and I've seen it twice on my own.
I think I've seen the Star Wars Holiday Special 5 times now. I do still think it's so bad it's good. I enjoy it quite a bit. There are points where it's fucking boring, but it's a train wreck to watch, and it's fucking stupid, and I love to shit on it. But again, even then, obviously it does have parts that are kind of boring. But I still enjoy it, and I don't get how it's not looked at it's so bad it's good.
Why? I don't know. I get a kick out of it. That stir, whip, stir shit, it makes me laugh every time. But, there's a lot of things that people just prejudge based on, you know, what they hear about it and things like that. For whatever reason, people didn't like Camp Laszlo on Cartoon Network. I mean, I don't know if everybody hated that, but that's an enjoyable show. Why the hell is it not more popular?
I'm gonna be honest, I forgot Camp Laszlo was disliked. That show's great. Why the fuck don't people like Camp Laszlo?
You know, they didn't like Squirrel Boy either, which, I mean, wasn't a masterpiece by any sense of the word, but it was a fucking decent show.
I'm gonna be honest, I remember very little about Squirrel Boy. I don't know how it holds up. I remember I used to watch it, but I remember very little about the show itself.
Now, another movie that I really like that a lot of people hated is Mortal Kombat Annihilation. Now, it's not as good as the first Mortal Kombat movie, and it has its problems. Like, a lot of characters were recast, some of the acting is laughable, but it's still an enjoyable movie to me. It's cheesy as fuck, and it's just enjoyable overall to me.
So Mortal Kombat Annihilation I also view now as a so bad it's good movie. It's fucking stupid and terrible, but I love how much of a train wreck it is. It makes me laugh with a lot of unintentional humor.
I fucking love cheesy shit. I just do. I don't know why, but I'm sure that there's a lot of other people who agree with me on that, and I'm sure there's a lot of people who disagree with me on that, but I really do think that Mortal Kombat Annihilation gets more hate than it deserves to.
No, I think it gets a fine amount of hate. It's pretty fucking bad, but I enjoy watching it because it's a fucking shit show.
One other thing I just kind of want to bring up, I remember earlier in the video I mentioned Duke Nukem, the females were kind of a sexist stereotype. Well, that goes for males too when you think about it, because in Duke Nukem Forever, all the males think about is sex and shit, so it goes both ways. I don't think the game is completely sexist against women. I think it stereotypes both genders equally.
And the men are definitely caricatures in the game too. I don't know if it's equal, but I don't care. It's fucking based.
I'd also recommend that you play the DLC, The Doctor Who Cloned Me. It's a Terminator reference. It's like $9, and the game itself is like $1, so it is a little bit more pricey than you'd probably want to pay for it, but if you're really into Duke Nukem 3D and you like having a laugh, and as long as you don't take the game too seriously, it's pretty fun.
As I said, underselling it. Duke Nukem Forever is great. And tell you what, that's actually going to do it. We're just going to wrap this up with part 1. I will do part 2 later, see? See? I'm being smart, getting 2 videos out of this. 2 videos for 2 videos. I'm making one on the other one. So yeah, we'll do that other one soon. Have a good one. Toodles.
What am I watching? I don't know, but I hate it.
I'm gonna fucking die here, Jack!